In the heart of a harsh land, where the icy wind whispers ancient tales, lies a village nestled among formidable mountains and dense pine forests. Here, untouched nature dictates its own laws, shaping not only the landscape but also the souls of those who dared to call this place home. The houses, built from sturdy wood with sharply pitched roofs to withstand endless snowfalls, seem to breathe life into the severe winter, sending spirals of smoke from their hearths into the sky. Every shadow here holds a story, and every corner echoes with memories of battles fought against the unknown. The people inhabiting this village are as resilient as the ice beneath their feet. Men and women toil side by side, forging weapons, tanning hides, and preparing food to sustain their families during the harshest month. There is no room for weakness here. Survival depends on unity and wisdom passed down through generations. Yet, amidst this harsh daily life, there is a remarkable harmony. Children play under the watchful eyes of elders, who recount legends of past heroes and creatures dwelling deep within the forest. The forest is both a source of life and a threat. With its ancient trees and ringing silence, it provides abundant game but also harbors dangers that only the bravest dare to face. The village hunters are revered almost like mythical beings, for they can read nature's signs and confront beasts that would make even the most courageous warrior tremble. It is within the depths of this forest that something occasionally emerges, testing not only the courage, but the very essence of those who venture beyond the known trails. Among the stories whispered by the hearths, a name resonates with admiration and sometimes quiet envy: Ano, the Hunter of the East. He is a man of imposing stature, with eyes that seem to catch every movement around him and a posture that betrays years spent in the wilderness. He is neither the oldest nor the strongest in the village, but there is something unique about his gait, an almost silent confidence, as if he is an extension of the very earth he treads. They say he is marked by the gods, though Ano always refutes these rumors with a reserved smile. His reputation as a hunter is born from feats bordering on the incredible. While others avoid the most remote corners of the forest, Ano feels at home there. He is the one who brings meat during lean times, procures valuable furs when all others despair, and seems to understand nature like no one else. Young people look up to him with admiration, hoping to grasp the secret of his skill. But Ano never boasts. For him, the forest is not an enemy to be conquered, but an ally to be respected. Despite his renown, Ano remains a simple man. He prefers the silence of the forest to the bustle of the village, and his home, a modest cabin on the eastern edge, reflects his life, practical and functional. He does not seek recognition, yet the village depends on him more than he is willing to admit. Ano knows that danger lurks at every turn, and not just for him. Every track in the snow could be an invitation for something dark, something even he is not prepared to face. Ano, the Hunter of the East, was not born to fanfare or omens. He was the youngest son of a blacksmith and tanner, raised in a humble cabin on the edge of the settlement. From an early age, his childhood was marked by an insatiable curiosity that sometimes tested his parents' patience. While other children played near their homes, Ano would venture into the forest, captivated by its sounds and mysteries. He had a habit of collecting feathers, shells, and even small bones, which he carefully arranged like treasures. But this innocent curiosity soon grew into something more: a need to understand the world around him. In his teenage years, life showed its harshest side. A brutal plague swept through the village, claiming many lives, including Ano's elder brother, who had been the family's pride. It was during this time that the quiet strength that would accompany Ano throughout his life began to form. After his brother's death, he took on responsibilities he was not ready for so early. He began to learn his father's and mother's crafts, but always found time for the forest, where he sought both solace and challenges. It was there that he first encountered real danger. A hungry wolf attacked him at dusk. Armed only with a makeshift spear, Anno managed to survive, but not without a scar on his shoulder, which became one of his most recognizable features. Today, as a mature man, Anno carries the lessons of his childhood and the trials of his youth. He sees life not as something simple, but as a series of tests sent by the gods or by nature itself. Although his fame as a hunter has elevated him in the eyes of the villagers, he knows that every step he takes on the ice can be fatal. Solitary nights in the forest bring both reflection and anxiety, and Anno understands that the real battle is not with beasts, but with the fear that tries to penetrate the human heart. He became who he is through pain and perseverance, but the future holds a disquiet that even his experience cannot foresee. Something is approaching, and Anno feels deep within that the current calm is merely a prelude to the impending storm. What awaits Anno and his village? Will he be able to withstand the coming threat, or will the harsh lands consume him along with his legacy? Deep within the impenetrable forest, where sunlight barely pierced through the dense foliage, lived creatures that only the bravest dared to call the Shadow Brothers. This was a trio of enormous bears, led by an imposing beast named Skan, who held the entire island in terror. Skan, of colossal size and bearing numerous scars telling tales of countless battles, commanded his two smaller brothers, Fenrir, known for his untamed temper, and Beorn, whose cunning more than compensated for his lack of physical strength. Together, they represented an unstoppable force, driven not only by hunger and instinct, but by something akin to strategic thinking. During a hunting season, when the forest teemed with abundant prey and predators, the Shadow Brothers became a constant and destructive force. They did not merely attack with ferocity, but disrupted the fragile balance of the local fauna. Moose and wild boars, once freely roaming the forest, began to disappear, forcing other predators to seek new territories or starve. Even wolves, known for their bravery, tried to avoid encounters with this trio. The trails traversed by the bears were strewn with broken trees, deep tracks, and the unmistakable scent of fresh blood. The threat emanating from the Shadow Brothers was not confined to the forest. Riverbanks, where animals quenched their thirst, became deadly traps. Birds fell silent, and stillness replaced the former vibrancy. It seemed the presence of these three brothers sucked the life force from the environment, leaving only desolation in their wake. Even the most secluded corners of the forest filled with unease. The Shadow Brothers were not just bears, but a symbol of chaos in the island's natural order, an ominous reminder that the forest belonged to its most dangerous creatures. From childhood, Anno had heard legends of creatures dwelling in the island's depths. Elders spoke of them in whispers, as if the mere mention of the Shadow Brothers could invoke their wrath. The lore claimed these bears were not ordinary beasts, but rather creations marked by the gods in a fit of anger or caprice. Skan, the eldest brother, was supposedly born during an eclipse, with eyes reflecting the flame of stars and a strength capable of crushing the very earth. Fenrir was as swift as the wind and struck with such power that even thick tree trunks would snap. Beorn, the youngest, was considered the most cunning, skillfully manipulating situations, to always emerge victorious. Together, they were presented as the embodiment of wild and merciless nature. Despite variations in the tales, they all agreed on one thing: no one who encountered the Shadow Brothers remained unharmed. It was said that experienced hunters who dared to challenge the bears for glory or survival disappeared without a trace. Some believed they were torn apart, while others thought the bears left them alive to spread fear, condemning them to a life with scars, serving as a perpetual reminder of their insignificance in the face of nature's power. For many, these stories were mere exaggerations or tales meant to frighten children, but those who knew the forest well understood there was a grain of truth in them. Anno, like many others, grew up on these stories, imprinted in his mind, but unlike the rest, he did not dismiss them as simple fables. During his hunting excursions, he noticed marks on trees, trails too wide for ordinary animals, and heard distant sounds indicating the presence of something large in the shadows. For him, the Shadow Brothers were not a myth, but a reality that needed to be understood before being confronted. And so, while most avoided the territories dominated by this trio, Anno felt that sooner or later their paths would cross, not by his will, but by the will of fate, ordained by the gods. A cold morning dawned. Fog enveloped the forest like a silent shroud, portending a long day. Anno woke early, as usual, and began preparing for the hunt. With the first rays of sun, he left his makeshift camp, a shelter of branches and hides, and headed to a small stream to wash. The reflection of his tired face reminded him of sleepless nights spent on vigil. He carefully inspected his gear, a sturdy wooden bow, a hunting knife that had become his loyal companion, and several stone-tipped arrows. He checked every detail, strung his bow and sharpened his knife, as he always did before venturing into the forest. His gaze was fixed on the forest stretching before him, a boundless expanse of trees and shadows. He inhaled deeply, breathing in the scent of damp earth and thick vegetation. Once satisfied that everything was in order, Anno began to make his way through the trees. He was not hunting for large game, but to feed his village and, if lucky, to procure a hide for clothing. The forest felt alive, filled with sounds and movement, the crunch of twigs under small animals' paws, the distant singing of birds and the rustle of leaves indicating the presence of something larger. Anno moved with the confidence of a man who knew the terrain, navigating every path, every tree, as if the forest were an extension of himself. The wind was at his back, and he headed towards a valley where he knew moose and wild boars often grazed. Upon reaching the designated location, Anno immediately set about establishing a temporary shelter. He did not plan a long stay, only to observe the surroundings and await a favorable moment to begin his hunt. He carefully built a small fire, aiming not to attract undue attention, but to create a source of warmth for himself and to cook food. The aroma of roasting meat and the melodic crackle of burning wood broke the pristine silence of the deep forest. Simultaneously, Anno began preparing the site for ingenious traps, skillfully setting snares of thin but strong ropes and sharpened stakes. To the accompaniment of the distant crackling fire, he sat on a fallen log, immersed in waiting and listening intently to every rustle. Time dragged agonizingly slowly, and Anno was keenly aware that patience was his greatest ally in such a hunt. However, the seemingly peaceful setting soon underwent a radical change. Just as Anno was about to check his traps, an inexplicable sense of unease enveloped him. The gusts of wind died down, the forest fell into an ominous silence, and for a moment, a chilling cold, with no visible source, pierced him. The experienced hunter immediately understood that something was amiss. His senses sharpened to their limit, and a quiet rustle emanating from the shadows did not go unnoticed. Slowly rising to his feet, Anno gripped the hilt of his knife tightly and began to scan his surroundings, trying to pinpoint the source of the threat. Suddenly, muffled but distinct sounds of heavy, swift footsteps reached his ears. From the darkness emerged gleaming eyes and an inexpressible fury. A pack of wolves, numbering about 5 or 6, surrounded the camp. Their piercing yellow eyes were fixed on Anno, and sharp fangs glinted menacingly in the dim light. He realized that before him were not ordinary prey, but seasoned hunters, and now he himself had become their target. The tension in the air reached its peak. The rustling of leaves seemed to transform into an ominous warning of impending danger. Realizing the inevitability of the confrontation, Anno knew he could not delay. The wolves moved swiftly, demonstrating coordinated and synchronized actions. Their eyes burned with an ominous fire in the dim light. Their muscular bodies moved with admirable grace and precision. Anno took a deep breath, feeling tension constrict every muscle in his body. He tried to remain calm, understanding that the outcome of the battle for survival depended on his every action. It was not his first time facing a ruthless enemy, but never before had it been wolves, and never before had the hunt taken such a dangerous turn. He raised his knife, which suddenly felt impossibly heavy, and took a defensive stance, his eyes fixed on the pack leader. The leader, a huge wolf with black fur and piercing yellow eyes, gave the command to attack with a ferocious snarl. The first wolf lunged forward, its sharp claws tearing through the air, aiming for Anno's chest. But the hunter was not caught off guard. With a lightning-fast leap, he dodged the strike, feeling only a slight brush of claws. In a counter move, his knife blade slashed the attacker's side, forcing it to retreat. However, the blood dripping from Anno's hand reminded him of the seriousness of the situation. The other wolves immediately went on the offensive, splitting into two groups, one attacking from the right, the other attempting to encircle from the left. Anno understood that he could not allow himself to be surrounded, and using years of experience, turned the surrounding environment to his advantage. With an unexpected leap backward, he pressed his back against a tree, deftly turning and dodging another attack. The knife blade sliced through the air and plunged into the neck of a wolf that had fiercely lunged at him. The beast collapsed to the ground with a dying gasp, but before Anno could catch his breath, he felt a huge weight crash onto his leg, knocking him down. One of the wolves, showing unexpected agility, managed to sink its teeth into his ankle. A cry of pain, torn from Anno's chest, echoed through the forest, but he could not afford to give up. Gathering his last strength, he pushed the wolf away with his free leg, breaking free for just a moment. The beast retreated, but the pain in his leg restricted Anno's movements. At that moment, the pack leader, emboldened, rushed to attack, baring its fangs, ready to finish what it had started. The battle turned into a chaotic whirlwind of movements, but Anno, obeying his self-preservation instinct, grabbed the wolf with his free hand and delivered a fatal knife blow to the animal's throat. The leader collapsed to the ground, gasping, and Anno felt relief, but only briefly. The remaining wolves still surrounded him, keeping their distance as if hesitating. After a tense and brutal confrontation, seeing the demise of their leader, the wolves realized their disadvantage. The two weakest cast a final glance at Anno before turning and disappearing into the forest, dissolving into the gathering darkness. Exhausted and breathing heavily, Anno sank to his knees. The pain in his leg was unbearable. He touched the amulet around his neck, made from the wolf's fang of one of the beasts he had previously vanquished. The battle had been hard, and he understood that even in victory, losses were inevitable. The struggle left a scar not only on his body, but also on his soul, a scar that would remind him of his encounter with death and his triumph over it. Casting a final glance at the silent forest, where the wolves had already disappeared from view, Anno began his journey back to the village. Each step echoed with pain in his leg, reminding him of the hard-fought battle he had endured and overcome. He knew he had once again proven the strength of the Eastern hunter. His people awaited him, and the legend of his courage would live on, as would their respect for the forest and its dangers. Anno returned to his home settlement, bearing the burden of a wounded leg, but his spirit remained unyielding. A sharp pain pierced his body, but it was a familiar pain, one that did not break him, but merely reminded him of the high price of survival in the wildlands. At his appearance in the village, the faces of the villagers reflected a mix of surprise and apprehension. Women hastily offered their help, while the men, watching reservedly, understood that Anno had faced a threat beyond ordinary dangers. Gathered around the crackling fire, Anno recounted his ordeal. He spoke of the wolf pack, of the relentless struggle in which he managed to prevail, and, of course, of the trophy he gained, a necklace that became a symbol of his victory over fate. Weariness was etched in his eyes, but the fire of determination still burned within them. "They were like shadows," Arno said with a seriousness that silenced everyone. "But there was no shadow large enough to consume me." His words echoed among the villagers, who were once again convinced that their hunter from the east had once again managed to overcome the impossible. The following days brought relative calm, but the villagers could not afford to relax. Months passed, and Arno, despite his recovery, felt a growing unease, as if sensing impending events. He understood that nature lives by its own laws, and somewhere deep in the forest, the three brother bears were gaining strength during their winter slumber, preparing for the challenges ahead. However, nothing was said about this. The villagers continued their usual lives, and Arno understood that he had to be ready, for the calm, as always, only foreshadowed a new storm. Winter finally gave way to unpredictable spring. While life in Arno's village flowed as usual, the surrounding nature began to awaken. Snow caps on the mountain peaks slowly melted, and icy winds were replaced by warm breezes. Along with this, something else awakened that could not be ignored: the hunger. In remote corners of the island, where the echo of winter slumber still lingered, the three brother bears began to stir. Their once thick, snow-covered fur was now damp with sweat as the enormous beasts, as if rousing from a long oblivion, emerged from their dens. The hunting instinct, dulled by long sleep, flared anew with renewed vigor. Their sharp claws glinted, and the roar of Bion, the most cunning of the brothers, ripped through the silence of the mountains. The hunger was insatiable and unstoppable. The brother bears split up, each seeking food. Bion, the most treacherous of them, exchanged glances with the others. He sniffed the wind and caught something familiar. His eyes, full of vigilance, darted into the distance, towards the village. He didn't know what it was, but he sensed the presence of small, weak creatures. Humans. His stomach, famished from months of rest, emitted a guttural growl. Slowly, following the wind, he approached Arno's village, which gradually emerged through the dense vegetation. It was there, in that village, that the next hunt was to begin. The setting sun painted the land in golden hues, as if warning of the start of a new hunting cycle, heralding the appearance of a great threat in the form of Bion, the cunning bear, who was already watching Arno's village with undisguised interest. The hunger, now even more insatiable, burned in his eyes, and the desire to destroy everything in his path became increasingly unbearable. The air was thick with the scent of approaching rain, which was to envelop Arno's village in a dense veil. The wind intensified, as if nature itself sensed the coming events. Bion, the cunning bear, crept silently, using the dense vegetation as cover. His brothers had split up, each seeking their own path to satisfy their all-consuming hunger, but Bion knew exactly what he needed. He had a clear objective: the village where the real hunt was to take place, and with one swift movement, he prepared to attack alone. His hunting instinct drove him forward, and he knew that chaos would begin with his arrival. With his powerful paws muffling every step, Bion reached the outskirts of the village. He felt the tension in the air, as if the residents had not yet realized the impending threat. It was the perfect moment. The bear approached, his sharp eyes glinting in the twilight gloom. He decided to start by attacking the weakest structures to cause panic and confusion. With one swipe of his clawed paw, he destroyed the fence surrounding the village, and the sound of breaking wood echoed throughout the area, making all the residents turn their gaze towards the destruction. Some fled, others tried to organize a defense, but Bion was already among them. The mighty bear, possessing not only strength but also cunning, began his attack, destroying homes and leaving a trail of devastation behind him. Screams and chaos engulfed the village, but Arno, in a distant hut, quickly understood what was happening. He rushed to the center of the village, where sounds of fierce fighting were already resounding, and saw the enormous bear crushing everything in its path. The instinct of a protector and the desire to defend his land seized Anno. He understood that the destruction of the village would mean the demise of his people. Giving the order for others to retreat, he moved towards the enraged beast with his sword in hand. The clash between Anno and Bjorn ignited instantly, marked by fury and ferocity. The bear's guttural roar, like a clap of thunder, shook the ground, while Anno, like a watchful beast, adopted a waiting stance, carefully tracking every movement of his opponent. Bjorn, armed with sharp claws and ferocious strength, unleashed a barrage of attacks on the hunter, but Anno, demonstrating miraculous agility and cunning, skillfully dodged the deadly blows. He understood perfectly that the key to victory lay in the ability to recognize and exploit the enemy's weaknesses, a skill honed by years of harsh trials. Using the terrain to his advantage, he maneuvered among fallen trees, avoiding direct confrontations with the enraged beast. Bjorn, however, was not without cunning. Quickly assessing the situation, he tried to encircle Anno, depriving him of maneuverability. But the hunter, reacting with lightning speed, dodged another deadly attack and delivered a precise blow, slicing through the bear's thick hide. The wound forced Bjorn to retreat, but only intensified his fury. The opponents continued to exchange blows, each striving to gain the upper hand. Anno felt fatigue gripping his body, but he had no right to surrender, for the safety of his native village, now at the mercy of this monstrous creature, was at stake. Bjorn, despite his cunning, could not anticipate all of Anno's movements, and another well-aimed strike from the hunter plunged the blade into the bear's chest. Once full of strength and rage, Bjorn staggered and, with a dying roar, collapsed to the ground, his massive body still. With a heavy heart, filled with the bitterness of the struggle, Anno looked at the defeated beast. He understood that this victory did not mean the end of danger, but, for now at least, his village was saved. Clenching his bloodied sword, he raised his gaze to the sky, where the last flickers of night gave way to dawn, heralding new challenges but also offering hope that the threat had finally passed. After defeating Bjorn, Anno felt the weight of the battle pressing on his body and mind. The bear lying before him, its massive, ravaged body, served as proof of his bravery and skill, but also as an ominous harbinger of events to come. Soon, the distant roars of the fallen beast's brothers reached him, like a wave of fury ready to crash upon everything he had achieved. Anno understood that Bjorn's death was not the end, but merely the beginning of something much greater. The other two bears, Fenrir and Skan, hungry for vengeance, would unleash upon him a fury whose power he could not yet imagine. The village was safe for now, but he could not afford to relax while his people were in danger. The sun slowly rose above the horizon, painting the sky in crimson and golden hues. Looking at Bjorn's body, Anno knew he had to act immediately. Time would not wait. The hunt for the second bear, Fenrir, would be his next mission. Legends he had heard over the years flooded his memory, but nothing could prepare him for what was to come. Fenrir was not just a bear, but the embodiment of elemental force, as vast and destructive as a raging storm. Anno understood that the victory he had achieved, however glorious, did not guarantee success if he did not properly prepare for the coming confrontation. Taking a deep breath, he headed towards the center of the village. With a heavy heart, Anno went to the outskirts of the village where, with the thoroughness of a true hunter, he prepared his hunting gear. He sharpened his sword, checked his bow and arrows, and put the rest of his equipment in order, essential for the upcoming expedition. There was something calming in this preparation. It was time to gather his thoughts, put all his experience into practice, and do what he did best: hunt. But this was no ordinary hunt. He was not hunting for food or glory, but for the survival of his land, his people. He understood that failure would jeopardize not only his life, but the lives of everyone he held dear. Fenrir would not be easy prey. Having completed his preparations, Arno quickly bid farewell to the few villagers still lingering, instructing them to take cover and be ready for the worst. He knew they would face hardship, but he believed in the resilience of his people. He understood that the struggle for his land was far from over. The cold wind blowing from the mountains portended a difficult and dangerous journey, but the resolve in his heart left no room for doubt. He would go in search of Fenrir and, if necessary, engage in another deadly battle. This was not the first time he found himself alone in the wilderness, pursuing an enemy that tested his strength, but now the stakes were higher than ever. With a firm stride and determined gaze, Arno left the village and headed into the unknown lands where the legend of Fenrir and his brothers was about to become reality. The hunt continues, and the story is far from over. The mountains rising before him seemed dark and ominous, as if sensing the coming events, but Arno was ready to face any challenge, for he knew that the struggle for his land and for his life was not yet finished. And so, with a courageous heart, he set off into the unknown, ready to pursue the second bear on a journey whose outcome was destined by fate itself.